Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from YourBlackWorld.com. This week, people were talking quite a bit about Rachel Jeantel. I want to make sure I pronounced her name properly. I hope I did. She was the quote-unquote star witness in the trial of George Zimmerman, who's been accused of killing Trayvon Martin. I was trying to figure out what's really going on. I saw Rachel's testimony, and I saw people debating what they felt about Rachel, her demeanor on the stand, the fact that it appeared that she might be illiterate. And there were people who took both sides. There were people who went as far as making fun of her, which I do not condone, but there were people who provided a lot of explanations and sometimes even excuses for what they saw. That she actually is, knows Spanish and Creole, that, English was her third language, that, that there's really, that anyone would have been defensive in that same situation. So I was just curious to get other perspectives on it. So I wanted to speak to someone I respect, Dr. Tyra Seldon, who is a very experienced educator. She's worked with kids in the public school system. And she, I think, is prepared to talk about what Rachel's testimony might say about the state of the public school system, given that she's such a high-profile person. Normally, we wouldn't be talking about what one person said on the stand in one trial, but obviously the Trayvon Martin case has become that big. So I want to say hello to Dr. Seldon. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Dr. Watkins. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Now, I'm being attacked right now. I'm being attacked left and right in social media by a lot of my so-called friends who feel that I was being elitist by saying that, I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that this girl's 19 years old and can't read. Now, it's not just concern for her, it's concern for all the kids that are being raised in that same situation. A lot of us saw Rachel and we saw familiarity. We saw a kid that reminded us of another kid that we'd seen somewhere in a public school. And, I don't want to be elitist. I'm not elitist. In fact, elite people don't like me when I go to visit the Chicago elite, the Valerie Jarretts and people like that. They get mad at me because I stand up and speak up too much for the poor and disenfranchised. So I refuse to accept any elitist labeling. That's not who I am. But I am a concerned African American. I think I have a right to do that. Now, I want to ask you, when you saw Rachel on the stand and you saw her demeanor, you heard her language, you saw that she was struggling to read a letter that she allegedly wrote, what was your take on all of that?
I have had a slightly different take than some of the commentaries that I've seen in social media. As an educator, one of the things that stood out to me is that, one, she didn't write the letter herself, and so that raised the flag. And instantly I thought, okay, well, if she did not write the letter, why did she have someone else write the letter to Trayvon Martin's mom? So I thought, okay, well, maybe emotionally she was too distressed. And so I set that aside. But it was when the defense attorney, West, I believe, asked her to read something that she had, the letter that had been written in cursive, and she said, I don't read cursive. And she just took like a quick glance at it. She didn't even make an attempt to read it. My gut instinct kicked in, and I thought, it's not so much that she can't read cursive. I suspect that this young lady cannot read, that there is an issue here in terms of her maybe being functionally literate to the point that she's able to function in our society, to be able to survive linguistically, but not to the point of being proficient or having mastered English, and not just as a second language, because I've read that as well, where some people suggested, well, because English is her third language potentially, or her second language potentially, then that helps us to understand or wrap our minds around why, there's so many nuances and idiosyncrasies in her speech. And I'm not convinced. I've worked with ESL and English as a new language students before. I've worked with adult learners and life skills, GED classes before, and what I see is a young lady who basically is struggling with literacy. And because of that, she's overcompensating. So even some of the attitude that people talked about that she displayed on day one, I can't help but wonder if that's because, the mask has been taken off or a layer has been peeled back, and she was incredibly vulnerable. Here's someone who, by circumstance, is part of one of the biggest trials of her lifetime and of her generation's lifetime, and she found herself basically being exposed. And again, I don't know this empirically. I don't know this definitively, but I saw someone who, if I had this young lady in the classroom, I would be concerned. I would think in terms of, okay, what's really going on here? And I think that's something I have not seen people address in terms of, okay, is this perhaps a canary in the mine? In what ways is she reflective of a generation of young people who have not been serviced well by our educational system? I would be curious to find out how far has her formal education gone? How long has she been in the country in terms of, being exposed to English as a primary language? Because I think all of those variables factor into the current moment and space that she's in terms of her grasp of the English language.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I'd like to ask you, and again, I'm not going to really say much because you're the expert. You know English better than most people. Your doctorate, was your doctorate in English? Is that correct?
Yes, it's in English language and literature. Yes. Okay,
and you're not an elitist. You grew up in Detroit. You've seen the hood in every way, shape, or form. You love black people. You commit your life to working with black people, and not in an elitist way, but in a way that says I'm willing to get my hands dirty for my community. So you're not a person who is turning your nose up at this young lady. You're a person simply speaking the truth as you see it. Now, let me ask you this. What do you say to those who, kind of say, well, she's just misunderstood, that everything's okay, and we're just being jerks by even highlighting this. I'm concerned about that because, to me, I think there's no greater type of racism than that racism of low expectations, really sort of looking at this person that looks like she may struggle in the world and saying, oh, it's no big deal. She's just gone through X, Y, Z, or this is really who she is. I refuse to do that. I just can't sit here and allow anybody to tell me that everything's okay in the world of Rachel or with any child who's similar to Rachel. So how do you balance that? If someone's asking you about this, how do you try to understand where she's coming from, why things happened the way they did, but yet still at the same time give this child what she needs? I mean, do you have that trouble sometimes, Dr. Seldon?
Yeah, I think, compassion and empathy has to be what guides us. And I think when we shift into that mode of being judgmental, of characterizing or labeling people, that's when I think we start losing our humanity. And I think in this particular instance, it's really shown a divide. We're very polarized as a nation, as a community, and I think there's a sense of embarrassment that I've seen echoed in some people's sentiments about her, that somehow she reinforces certain stereotypes, and I think that's highly problematic. I think it's also problematic when people defend certain behaviors without an attempt to really understand them, and that's why I'm not quick to definitively make any kind of assessment about this young lady. I simply think that, it's an interesting time in our history as a people, and I think what this case is helping to draw out is that we've taken our corners, and in some ways it's the divide between the haves and the have-nots, and because of that, it's easy for people to spin it and say, oh, you're being elitist, or you're being quote-unquote bougie, you're being status quo, and I don't think it's that simple. I think it's much more complicated than that. I think that we've taken a human being and we've elevated this young lady to this sense of expectations that I do think that we have to factor in her age. No, she's not a little girl, but she's not a woman either. She's probably had very limited life experiences where some of us are speaking from places of wisdom. At the age I am now, I've experienced so much more than I did when I was 19 that shapes and informs my worldview. So I think some of us are standing up on a perch upon high, we're looking down, and we're not really trying to understand all the variables and nuances that I think this case is really bringing to light. So I think when you take compassion and empathy out of the equation, it becomes very easy to judge, and I think that's where we are, and I think that is the mirror we need to hold in front of ourselves and say, wait a minute, what's really going on here? Is this really about her, or is this about us? And I think that is critical at this stage in our development as a nation, as a people, as a community, and especially for those of us who love and are passionate about our young people being successful in society.
Well, spoken like a true scholar, and I think people should read your stuff. You write for Your Black World a lot. And I work closely with you and Dr. Steve Perry, Dr. Christopher Enden, and Dr. Mark Lamar Hill. You all are my key educators. And the reason I choose to work with you so closely is because I know you care about our kids and you're willing to fight for our kids. And that's why I respect you. So thank you very much for your time, Dr. Seldon. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the work that you do, Dr. Watkins. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for checking us out at yourblackworld.com. And, I think this conversation is important because Rachel represents a lot of what's going on with our kids, good and bad. And I think we should have this conversation bravely and openly and show the diversity of our community. And, so I would argue that speaking honestly about this issue does not mean that you're acting white. So let's kill that stupidity and really have an honest dialogue. I'm not going to sit here and be silent when I see something that disturbs me. I don't care if black people get mad, white people get mad, or anybody else. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.